This is Matt for Boxing Social in association with Empire Fight Store. Delighted to be joined by Rob Holdsworth. Today something a little bit different. We normally speak to boxers, promoters, trainers. Today we're speaking to someone who works on the mind of a fighter, and not just fighters and athletes, everyday people, but you do work with athletes, and you've mentioned world champions. So Rob, just briefly give us an overview on what it is you do and explain hypnotherapy and what that is.
Yeah, bro. So first of all, I'm a mindset coach, a hypnotherapist as well. Do you want to grab that?
No, you're all right.
Oh, you're sure?
Yeah, just speak into it.
Ultimately, hypnotherapy is all works with the subconscious mind. So how we approach life, how we view life is all down to a belief, a meaning, or an emotion that we attach to these external things. Mm-hmm. So we need to be aware of these beliefs. These beliefs dictate how we respond, how we feel to every single situation. Hypnotherapy basically works with that part of the mind where the belief systems are, and it all works with relaxation. So it gets someone into a nice relaxed state. Yep. Once they're in that nice relaxed state, we've got something called the CCF, the conscious critical faculty. Basically, it's just a fancy way of saying a gatekeeper into the subconscious. When someone's nice and relaxed, the subconscious is open, and then anything that I prime the mind with freely enters, and that's how we can get to rewrite any limiting beliefs or any unhelpful subconscious programs.
Give us an example, because a lot of people, a lot of athletes, they'll have a lot of, especially in combat sports, in what we deal with in boxing, they'll go into fights with maybe nerves or slightly to the back of the mind thoughts of, what if this does go wrong? Do you have techniques on how you sort of eliminate that? Is it like positive reinforcement? Give us an example, like specifically, like if a fighter's suffering with maybe nerves or anxieties or negative thoughts about a fight they're coming up with, what could you do to help? What would you sort of do? And I know everyone's different, so we'll take that into account, but sort of give us as generic answer as you can.
Two things that you mentioned there, feelings, emotions, and also thoughts. If we can take a control over his thoughts, over his feelings, ultimately we can change how we approach things, how we behave, how we feel. So if someone's feeling doubtful, if someone's feeling anxious, behind that are thoughts. So a part of my approach is basically getting the client, getting the person that I'm working with to identify what they're thinking about. That's where the work happens, and once that person can identify what they're thinking about, then they can start to challenge it, they can start to rationalize it, and then they can start to redirect it. So one of my biggest approaches is psychoeducation. So it's basically educating the people that I'm working with on the mind. Once they've got that education, it's going to help them gain that closure, it's going to help them understand things, why they're having these thoughts, and ultimately they can start to gain that control over them.
What sort of techniques do you use? Because I can imagine it's not just a one-stop shop. Someone comes, approaches you and goes, look, I've got this fight coming up, this happens. What sort of the different techniques that you use to speak to people, and just general advice that you give on how to get this positive mindset? How do you approach it?
It is all about that control. So once someone can shift how they're feeling, so the majority of fighters that I work with are feeling that doubt, and they're not doing anything with it. So they're allowing that doubt in, they're feeling it, they're feeling anxious, and they're not doing anything with it. Once that I've got a model, and that model is all surrounding the acknowledgement, the understanding of that thought, and then redirecting it. Once they can start to get that sense of that control, ultimately they're going to start to feel like they're in control. Yeah. So naturally the positive mindset just starts to come from that, because ultimately doubts and anxieties to a lot of people feel like they're being controlled by them emotions. Yeah. But once we regain and take back that control, all of the positivity starts from there.
How sort of important do you think it is in this day and age that this is something that's sort of opened up to more for athletes? Because, in a bygone era, we wouldn't see this amount of information. Sports changed over the years, especially in boxing. We've got sports science now where they literally will analyse every little last thing to do with fitness. We hear a lot about fighters going to see psychologists and things like that. Now, in a sport like boxing, obviously, if you know your opponent's going to see somebody and that becomes public knowledge, whether it's for good, bad or indifferent, there's always going to be that stigma attached of, if you need to go see someone and I don't, that's 1-0 to me, and it's used as a game. But you're very much like, no, this is an added advantage. This is just extra help, like doing an extra gym session, like doing extra, I don't know, meditation, like extra workouts, sort of from your point of view? Do you see where that comes across in boxing, how that correlates? Have you found any stumbling blocks with it?
The stigma is there, 100%. We can see it with Froch Groves. That's number one right there. That's like the biggest example. That was used against Froch for, you know, we know the story behind that. It still is a challenge. You know, there's big names that I've worked with that don't want that information to become a knowledge. They don't want the fact that they're working with a mindset coach, a hypnotherapist to be public, so it can't be used against them. But yeah, you're dead right, Matt. Like I'm of the opposite. I want to see this like completely synonymous with sports in general, just like nutrition, just like strength and conditioning. It's all a part of gaining that extra advantage. Just like you work out in the gym, you've got to work out the mind as well. Yeah,
because you'll be wanting it to get to the stage where, for example, there'll be certain athletes that maybe don't take supplements, like, you know, like the protein powders and things like that. Other athletes do, but it's not really seen as a massive thing. It's just a preference. Is that what you're wanting to do, like in the next couple of years? Because you'll be wanting to expand your business and become more, I would assume, more mainstream, pick up more clientele. Obviously, the more you do that, the better it is, obviously, for yourself and for the athletes when they get this sort of help from you. Is it what's your sort of goal in the next couple of years? How do you get to it?
Yeah, to do exactly that, Matt. You know, the best thing is it's a win-win situation for me. For me to help as many people as possible helps me, and the more that helps me, the more I can keep spreading the business, keep spreading the word of it. So yeah, I definitely want to keep pushing it. I want it to be mainstream. I want it to be completely destigmatized. So when you would just never hear it, someone going to the gym and looking to push themselves in the gym. Yeah. It's physical health. There's a positive connotation behind it. As soon as you hear the word mental health, instantly it's negative. Yeah. And that's what I'm looking to change, because if we can do it with fighters, like the hardest sport in the world, like mentally and physically, then I'm sure a lot of other sports will follow.
What I will say is we are seeing now more athletes are coming out and saying things about mental health. Obviously everyone's got their own opinion on it. Mine, for what it's worth, is I believe everyone's got mental health. I think it's just how you deal with it and to what degree. Obviously some have it really bad, others don't. It's just, I suppose it's just a scale of things. When you see the likes of Tyson Fury sort of exposing to the world what he's been through and saying, look, I've been there, I've done that, I've bounced back, lost all the weight, kind of thing. And he might not have done it through hypnotherapy, but, you know, when you see him being open about it and saying things like, you know, go see someone, talk, let's talk, how sort of vital is that message, that we've got someone of that stature doing things like that?
Yeah, it's massive, absolutely massive. It creates an ease of access to the work then. You know, if that person's doing it, then, it must be fine. It must be good. Yeah. So yeah, for me, bro, it's absolutely vital.
What made you get into this? Because it's quite I suppose it is a bit of a niche sort of industry. We see a lot of people surrounding the boxing world at the minute. You know, people are becoming more familiar with fighters' teams, even doctors and things like that. But why for you? How have you sort of found yourself into this career path? Because it's quite specific, isn't it?
Yeah. It didn't start off with sports initially though. So initially wanted to be a counsellor and a psychotherapist. So did that at uni. But part of my first year was hypnotherapy, and that was a big thing that I took to. So for about 2 years, I worked with everyday objectives, concerns, fears, phobias, and then it was 2 years into it. I thought, well, I love fighting. Yeah. Why don't I just niche down into sports? And I started off working with rugby players at first, and then it just sort of transitioned into fighters, and then that's sort of like where the biggest success I've had really, and where it's, because obviously a lot of people say it's 80-90% mental, 10%, 20% physical. Yeah. So yeah, like, it was just literally just a natural transition.
How many, we'll say, fighters do you think at the minute you currently deal with? I know you deal with not just boxing, but you deal with MMA as well, and also not just people either locally based or in this country. You're dealing with people across the globe as well, and you do a lot of sessions via Zoom and things like that. How many fighters and combat athletes would you say you're currently dealing with?
Probably around 130, 140.
What, currently 130?
Yeah. All working with them on different frequencies.
Yeah.
So I might see people every week. I might see people twice a week, 2 times a month, every 4 weeks. Some people just dip in and out as and when they're in a fight camp. But yeah, I've got there's an army there at the minute, all different people across the world, different disciplines. So yeah, man, we're moving.
I suppose to help you, it'd be easier if all these people would come out and just say, look, yeah, this is just part of camp, you know, we train X amount of days, one day I go for a massage, then I go for chirotherapy, then I come and see Rob for hypnotherapy, back at it, train, rest day. How do we get rid of that stigma then? What's the answer?
I think sort of alluding to the Tyson Fury comment that you made, Matt, like if we can get a lot of the high profile fighters to say like this
Give it a whirl.
it's good shit. We need to be working with the mind just as much that we need to be working with the body. So I think if we can either hit the masses, get as many people on board with it as possible, and or get the high level people, the elite athletes. And probably I'd say about 90% of the people that I work with are open about it and they're happy to share it, but there is still that 10%, and it is more so the people who are at the upper level of the game, so people in the UFC that I've worked with that don't want to be named, people who are world champs and British champs, European champs that don't want to be named, so yeah.
I suppose in a way it's their privacy and things like that as well, so we do understand that. But when you're looking at current state now, especially things like boxing, we see how hard it is to give up. I mean, we recently seen Kell Brook, obviously he's going through a situation at the minute where a video was released. I mean, for me, it wasn't even what he was doing, it's the fact that he had someone in that circle who would be willing to release that video, because ultimately, if he needs help, that's great, but to have a person around that who would do that. But for you, when you look at athletes who are maybe struggling, this could be something they could come to you for, maybe not just while they're in camp for a fight, but retirement, plans for retirement. What everyone's always thinking, what am I going to do when I retire? Is that thing, do you think that's somewhere where you could come in and go, you know what, positive affirmations and bring yourself on board so that they maybe can open their mind up to different possibilities? Because boxing's all they know, a lot of these fighters. They don't always want to go into coaching and training because it's not the same as fighting. You can't replace that buzz no matter what. So do you think you could help with something like that?
100%. Clarity, objectives, you've got to have purpose. It's the biggest thing. Like boxers getting up to like working, they've always got a purpose and they've actually got specific dates to be working towards. So they've constantly got this motivation, then they come to the end of their career. What are they working towards? It gets lost. So then naturally when we don't have purpose as humans, that's it. That's where things do go to shit and people do get lost. But yeah, definitely to create that clarity, to create that purpose again by just redirecting the thoughts, redirecting the energy, the time, the approach to life, we can definitely, that's where I would come in.
Have you got a message for sort of people who doubt either this method or the things that you do? You know, we mentioned hypnotherapy, and obviously you're not going to give up everything you do because you've trained years to put a program together for yourself. But can start with a consultation, obviously with yourself, or a conversation. Have you got a message to people who maybe are struggling, who want a bit of help, but either are too embarrassed or don't know where to go to get it? Have you got a message for them people?
Yeah, of course. It's literally be open to this work. You never know what's on the other side. Like the biggest thing is just dip your toes in, have a consultation. It's not necessarily just with myself, but delve into the work, do a little bit of research, you know, reach out to some people, test the water, and then literally we just flow from there, because you'll be very surprised at what can come out during a therapy session.
Absolutely. Well, Rob, look, this has been something a little bit different for me. It's always good to have variety. We're normally used to, you know, boxers, press conference, gym visit. So to get this side of things on a perspective of someone who's working with, you know, like you mentioned there, hundreds of combat athletes, it's important to get this message out. So I appreciate your time. Thanks for talking to Boxing Social, and fingers crossed we'll see you grow and become a little bit more mainstream as well.
Legend, brother. Thank you very much for having me on. Appreciate it.